Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Omar Khalid. But today is the 30th of December 2021. Just 2 days to go before the new year begins, and we have a lot of stories to discuss with you, to share with you. The first of which is the growing religious intolerance in India, of which now a lot of people within India are taking cognizance, whether it be Nasiruddin Shah, whether it be other people who are now openly talking about this religious intolerance in India, whether it be against the Christian community, whether it be against the Muslims in India or in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, whether it be against the Dalits, the Hindu community inside of India, which is being pushed by the BJP and the RSS and such organizations, is trying to make India no longer a democracy, no longer a multipolar society, no longer a pluralistic country or a pluralistic society. In fact, it is aiming to become a Hindu-dominated society where no other religion or no other caste can thrive in peace. This is going to be our first story. Our second story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Afghanistan, where the United States has appointed now an envoy to defend the rights of Afghan women, which signals a key priority as far as the US policy towards Afghanistan is concerned. We know very well that the West, including the US, is not accepting the current government of the Afghan Taliban and had set up certain preconditions for its acceptance of this current Afghan government, and that includes the rights of the women. And this is a step in that direction. Reena Amiri, who is an Afghan-born US scholar, who is also a mediation expert, she has already served at the State Department, has now been named by the US government. This is going to be our second story. Then we'll be talking about Omicron and Pakistan, who's reported 482 new infections in the last 24 hours, up from 348 a day earlier. This is the first time in nearly 4 weeks that the daily cases have risen above 400, which signals also that Omicron is on the rise. And in the coming days, we are going to see even more cases of Omicron unless and until we don't take the necessary precautions. Then, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go towards Apple, the company that makes the iPhones or the Macs, and it has said it has placed a southern Indian factory of iPhone assembler Foxconn on probation after both the companies found that some worker dormitories and dining rooms had not met with the of course, this is standards that were required. Also, a mass food producing and poisoning and protests happened over the workers' living conditions. Finally, the Pakistan Hindu Council has invited a group of 250 Hindus to visit the country in an attempt to encourage faith tourism. Not the first time that the Hindu community has been invited, and it won't be the last time. Of course, it signals also a very different approach towards minorities as compared to India. Let's begin with our first segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns the religious intolerance in India, something that has been going on since the BJP government took into power even more prominently. More in the following report.
The escalating climate of intolerance and extremism in India not only jeopardizes the survival of religious minorities in the country, but also threatens to undermine regional stability. Politicians and monks affiliated with ruling BJP are inciting violence and openly calling for ethnic cleansing, sparking unprecedented spate of attacks against Muslims and Christians. India's Christian minority, who make up about 2% of India's population, has been mercilessly harassed and intimidated by Hindu vigilante groups disrupting Christmas festivities, accusing Christian missionaries of religious conversion, violently attacking pastors and passing discriminatory anti-conversion laws. Indian Muslims, an increasingly marginalized group, have seen the worst excess of Indian state as they were the first victim of BJP's Hindu majoritarian agenda and introduction of Citizen Amendment Bill, bloody repression of Kashmiris, and conduct of hate conclave to spearhead state-sponsored massacre of Muslims are few instances exposing evil designs of Hindu nationalist Indian state. According to a recent report by New York Times, the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, a government body, recommended that India be put on its red list for severe violations of religious freedom. India has been ranked the 10th worst country globally by the Open Doors USA 2021 World Watch list when it comes to Christian persecution. Lending credence to its crisis of credibility on occasion of Christmas, Indian Union Ministry froze all bank accounts of Mother Teresa's missionaries of charity in the country, leaving 22,000 patients and employees without food and medicines. Modi regime has reduced India to a land of intolerance, thriving in the cradle of violence where hardliners RSS reigns state apparatus.
When it comes to, religious intolerance in India, there seems to be a lot of examples, as has been detailed in the report that you've just watched, whether it be the Mother of Teresa, a charity that has been stopped funding from abroad, as a charity that has been working for different decades, since different decades in fact, whether it be the different churches that have been vandalized in the past, whether it be the churches that were so afraid to open properly because of the fear that they will be vandalized by the BJP. Waqas Ali Kausar Saab joins us online. Waqas, yes, you were saying.
Yes, thank you for having me. First, we need to understand that there is a particular aim of RSS to create an ethnic in the state, and particularly the recent incident. On October 14, when one of the leaders started talking about the alleged conversions, and then it was followed up by a certain section of his own party, which says that there should be complete ban on veil and conversion. They have also started a campaign. What I want to particularly say is that the very much the words like Chadar Mukt, Father Mukt, is that India free of veil wearing Muslims and priests particularly. This is a very bold statement that was followed by many actions by the right wingers over there. You have seen the vandalization of some of their religious seminaries and buildings of Christian communities as well. Over the period of time, we have been saying that the politics of hate actually, it never restricts to one community. This politics of marginalization and exclusion actually results in engulfing the
But this politics of hate, this politics of exclusion, Waqas, where is all of this leading to? At least for a country like India, for a so-called champion of democratic rights, where is all of this leading to? Will it result in the exclusion of all the other minorities apart from the Hindus? Will it result in the implosion of India as we see it? Will it result in more small, India being divided into other sections, as is of course feared by a lot of people within India? What is your assumption?
See, I would see it from one more perspective, that the divide and exclusion, it never stops to some communities. I guess once it started from, particularly when it started from Kashmir, when we see that this on the 5th of August, and then we saw what happens through different CAA and other laws, and then we see now it's the Christian community. The society like India, you can't have a society which is quite diverse, and then you can't do all these things where you do the politics of exclusion, and particularly when you marginalize large section of people. I personally think if it's not about Christian or Muslim community, it will further complicate. It will go within the community of same religion and then started isolating people on different maybe ethnic lines or maybe geographical lines. So the politics of hate, it can attract people for some time, but overall implication for society is not good, and that's what we are witnessing over there as well. But you see this also, there is also repercussion towards Kashmir as well, when we see that this is not in isolation. In particularly when we see Kashmir, you see that there is also marginalization and isolation of Kashmiris through delimitations, through stripping the statehood, through I must say curbing their fundamental political rights. So I guess this entire thing, there is no end to it. There is a spiral effect. It goes deep down to the society, and a country like India, which is of course very diverse based on its ethnicities, multiple religions and language. I guess this is not a healthy factor.
Because India is a country with all of its policies that it is implementing nowadays should be put on the blacklist of the FATF, should be put on other human rights lists as well, that it is of course not following and in fact blatantly violating. Despite that, of course, we understand, and we've talked about in the past as well, as to why this is not happening in India, because there is a certain geo-economic understanding or geo-economic interest that other countries in the West have, and so they turn a blind eye towards all that is happening in India. Nevertheless, the people in India are the ones that are suffering as well, especially the minorities. Now, when people like Naseeruddin Shah or others start talking about the 200 million Muslims that are going to react or stand up to all of these atrocities, where do you see India's minorities in the years to come?
See, this is very challenging. I mean, in India, you can the Hindu politics can't work. It's the India politics larger that can work, I guess. So right now, what politics we see and we are witnessing is that that's not a very encouraging and healthy trend. The problem with such politics is that right now you create a constituency. They attach certain hopes. The hopes are very much there that you build on certain exclusion and the idea of exclusion particularly, and such hopes actually such politics actually demands in long term that such action should be taken. You become more bold, you have to appease your constituency, you have to keep them intact, and for that you do the politics of more hate, the politics of more exclusion. Now, the problem I personally see is that there's more fragmentation in society, there's more isolation in society, and of course there will be more criticism from within an external world, and that we are seeing that now internationally credible newspaper media is voicing now that there is a real danger for the minorities, and particularly when this is supported by some right-wing parties, and this overall the apparatus work in that lines. This is a very sad situation, and I guess there's a larger responsibility of the civil society of India particularly as well to stand up and protect their value system, particularly the minorities over there, which should be not only protected, but they have to be given confidence. Otherwise, the entire situation over there, which is what we are witnessing, is not very encouraging, and this has a larger, deeper political and economic impacts in the society as well.
Waqas, do you feel there's going to be some kind of a reaction coming from within India, within the opposition? And do you feel that whatever is happening in India as far as the minorities are concerned is also part of a political gimmick to gain more votes?
It is there, but see, the problem with such politics is that once you blend this with the religion, and I guess we have many examples in all the context, if we see such politics. The problem with the opposition, the problem with the parties over there, the problem with the civil society is that it is very difficult to counter. Because with the liberal narratives that you have right now, it's very challenging to counter BJP given the way it has blended nationalism, religion, politics of exclusion, and then the minorities as well. It's very challenging, and what we see over the period of time is that even those who are protesting for their fundamental rights, they are called as traitors, or maybe farmers. You have seen that the way they were labeled and they were called. These are totally created another scenario. Had that been happened in other government in India, things would have been different. But see, this is the result of politics of exclusion. This is the result of politics which you built on, division, that you further create divisions within society. And of course, this is quite challenging for the particular civil society to react, because you try to connect people sentimentally. You try to emotionally charge people, and it's very difficult to give logic to them.
All right. Finally, when you hear in conclaves happening in India where it is said openly that the Muslims need to be killed, when you hear people lynching the minorities such as Muslims for eating cow meat, when they are forced to say Jai Ram or other Hindu, of course, slogans, the world does not react as such as we have seen since the past few months. Do you feel that some kind of a reaction needs to come from the neighboring countries? Pakistan has been doing whatever it can on all the diplomatic fora to highlight these atrocities. Is it also not the responsibility of other countries to talk about these atrocities?
Yes, we need to put this thing into one important perspective for us particularly. I mean, I must say that particularly when it comes to the right, raising the voices for the people, I must say that particularly when we see this in Kashmir particularly, I guess we also need to focus on that area as well. For Pakistan, or maybe for the people from Kashmir, what we see that the larger problem at the moment is that this politics never stops over there. It has a greater impact in Kashmir. It has a greater imprints in Kashmir. So one of the worrying factor over there is that once you have these isolations and divisions, this has the impact on the Kashmir, which is very much disputed territory. And of course, Pakistan is party to it. and particularly Kashmiris are the central party to it. So for me, that concern is even more important, that the way right now we have seen the delimitation commission, where you are reducing the political space for people of certain religion, particularly Muslim religion, and trying to create more vacancies and spaces for the people who are in minority. The problem is not about in electoral politics, it should reflect it's about the number, it's about the majority as well. So this is a reverse thing when it comes to Kashmir. So I guess that angle is more important for us to understand, that these policies have a very strong trickle down effect in Kashmir, and what we see, the reduced political space, what we have seen, that more violence, what we have seen, more political disturbance, and then of course stripping people out of their, you just see the way after 5th of August things unfolded in a very systematic way. I guess this is something we need to see and judge, and it's a matter of very grave concern for us, particularly that such policies are also not only applied but enforced effectively in Kashmir, that is further alienating people of Jammu and Kashmir.
Thank you very much, Waqas Ali Kausar, foreign affairs expert, to have joined us and to have talked to us about this religious intolerance that has been going on in India, and it has really picked up pace in the last year. 2021 has seen so many incidents of religious intolerance. We don't know what the next year is going to bode for India and for its minorities. We can only hope and pray. Let's come to our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, that concerns the US-Afghan relations, in a move that reflects what the US wants as far as its policies towards the Afghan government and its recognition or not of the Afghan government is concerned. There has been an envoy that has been nominated to defend the rights of Afghan women. This shows a clear priority of what the US wants from the current Afghan Taliban. More in the following report.
The different cultural interpretation of human rights, and particularly women's rights, continue to pose serious obstacle for interim Taliban government's bid for recognition. Despite Taliban government's assurances to uphold women's rights, international community remains skeptical, given certain contradictory decrees issued by the group. In their latest decree, the Taliban banned women from traveling long distances unless escorted by a close male relative. Signaling women's rights as key priority, the US have appointed 2 female diplomats to senior roles representing Washington in Afghanistan. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken appointed Rina Amiri, senior advisor, as a special envoy for Afghan women, girls and human rights, and Stephanie Foster, a Department of State veteran, as a new senior advisor for women and girls to US operations. In response to ultra-conservative measures taken by Taliban government regarding women, Information Minister Fawad Chaudhry noted that retrogressive thinking is a danger for Pakistan, while assuring Pakistan's full support to the Afghan people. The silver lining is that the Taliban are gradually enacting progressive reforms to ensure the regional and global actors that the ruling group is cognizant of fundamental human rights. They also issued a momentous decree earlier that took a firm stand against forced marriages and tribal customs treating women as property, a step hailed as phenomenal by rights advocates. Marking another step forward, the Taliban leadership stated that they have ordered Afghan courts to treat women fairly, especially widows seeking inheritance as next of kin. Earlier, the UN envoy, Deborah Lyons, emphasized that the Taliban have recognized the concerns raised by the international community and are trying to address them.
Usama Nizamani, who is a researcher with IPRI, joins us online to talk about this very important topic. Usama, thank you very much to have joined us. Usama, 2 women who've been nominated as far as Afghanistan is concerned from the US side. We understand, we know that the US wants women's rights and of course girls' education to be one of the key priorities as far as the current Afghan government is concerned. Do you feel this is going to create more tension between the Afghan Taliban and the US government, or do you feel some kind of a midway could come between the two, a middle ground could be achieved between the two in order to move forward together?
I personally think that I'd rather take an optimistic approach that, for Taliban, it would serve as an opportunity to, in fact, make more good on some of the earlier commitments that they have made with the international community and especially with the United States as they were engaging in the earlier peace agreement that they concluded with the United States. I think the appointment of the special envoy on women's rights would at least provide another step to Taliban now have a one-on-one engagement with the group, with United States itself in a manner that they have not done previously. Like, let me cite you an example. Earlier, when Taliban took reins of power, everybody was expecting that as they would announce the interim government, inclusion of women would in fact be ensured by Taliban. But we saw that that expectation was not met. Perhaps this opportunity would certainly provide some kind of an opening to Taliban itself to go ahead and have a peer on the other end in Afghanistan to.
But in your point of view, Usama, do you feel that the Afghan Taliban will use this opportunity?
It's difficult to say because in the past, as we've seen that the old bloc, the old guard, since it's the one that is in the position in the cabinet itself. They're actually the ones that are calling the shots. So I think the paradigm shift that was being expected by a lot of people, by a lot of experts in the region, outside the region, it's not come off as drastically as it was being expected. But I think, again, this opportunity that is being provided now by the United States to allow Taliban to come and make some good on their promises, Taliban should be doing that. For example, let me also quote one more example. For example, earlier we had expected that Taliban would allow women to go to school, have right to education. So I think it's over there and in other areas, for example, where United States can work with regional countries, especially Pakistan, countries within Central Asia and Middle East, to have a more regional approach, a women-centric approach in terms of ensuring that women in Afghanistan can have exercised the right to access to education, have the right to economic pursuits, for employment, for business. So I think that's something that Taliban should meet.
Usama, I was talking to some experts yesterday and they were saying that we need to give the Afghan Taliban's government some time for them to kind of put this new system into place that would include women's education or women's right in the society. But it seems as if the West is not really waiting for that time. Do you understand or do you feel this urgency by the West, and do you feel this compliance is going to take some time, and will it create more ripples in as far as the relationship between the West and Afghanistan is concerned?
I think while, if you're making cultural comparisons between the West and the East, I think there are certainly, drastic divergences in terms of what is being expected over here. But I think in terms of the basic denominators that are being expected from Taliban to ensure that, those rights are met, I think they're not something that are quite strange over here. In a society like Pakistan itself, which respects the conservative culture itself, it has made a lot of progress in ensuring that women have right to access to education, employment. So I think the same can be learned by the Taliban, and they can come out more with a lot of transparency in terms of what they intend to do in the next 5-6 months or in 1 year. And then in terms of meeting those expectations, what is the kind of help that they need from the international community?
Now you talk of meeting expectations, Usama, whether it be Rina Amiri or whether it be Stephanie Foster. These two women, when they of course prepare their reports as far as what is going on in Afghanistan and send it to the US, we already know that the US has frozen a lot of the Afghan money and money that is needed by Afghanistan and the Afghan government in order to kind of stand up a bit on its own 2 feet. Do you understand that all this money or all this economic aid is somehow, somewhere also linked to these preconditions that the West has put on Afghanistan? And if Afghanistan does not comply with these preconditions in the very near future and takes its time, that it will create more issues as far as the current economic situation in Afghanistan is concerned?
Yes, I think instead of looking at the consequences of non-compliance, I think U.S. has expressed an interest that, here they are giving an opportunity to Taliban to go ahead and ensure, what kind of progress they're really willing to see through over here. So I think what Taliban can do is, and since, as you just pointed out, access to those resources is very much important. So I think a very clear roadmap needs to be laid down in terms of what verticals does Taliban have before them. And again, for Taliban, it's important that, they should come up with, although it's for the Afghans to decide, I think, but there needs to be some kind of a working group within Afghanistan that should be, engaging with Taliban, and the Taliban should also appoint a woman special envoy to deal and engage with not just the U.S. but also regional and the Western bloc also, in terms of addressing some of the progress that is being made so far. What are the expectations, or what are some of the milestones they need to cover down the road, say in next 6 months, in 1 year or 2 years? And that is where I think what the U.S. could do is they could condition that progress, and then it can gradually unfreeze some of that much needed asset.
All right, Usama, last question. The Afghan Taliban government has taken a little step forward and stating that they have ordered Afghan courts to treat women fairly, especially widows seeking inheritance as the next of kin. Also, the Taliban have recognized concerns which have been risen by the international community and are trying to address them. This has been stated by the U.S. envoy Deborah Lyons. In all of this context, time is a very essential factor. And we understand we've also discussed the fact that the Afghan government cannot just take decisions or maybe apply them in at a very rapid pace, seeing that they are taking over a country that has a lot of other issues, especially a humanitarian and an economic crisis that is engulfing it. Now, under this whole situation, the aid that has been stopped by the U.S. and the West, what needs to be done? What should be the order of the day in your point of view in order for some kind of progress to be made in Afghanistan?
I think in terms of classification or prioritization, of course, it's the humanitarian aid that needs to take precedent over everything else. But then at the same time, I think since now that the world is living in 21st century, and I think the kind of systems and the kind of exposure that the Afghan population itself has had in these last 2 decades, the expectations of the Afghan public have also, have gradually transformed in these last 2 decades. So the Afghan people are also expecting, better opportunities to life. And I think the one primary motivator, or one of the primary motivators that I see people could be driving, Afghan people to seek refuge in other countries could in fact be the right to a better life itself for their women, for their girls. So I think ensuring the access to that right itself would prevent, or in fact create conducive conditions for Afghan people, Afghan women to, see a future for themselves in their own country, instead of moving to some other country for better opportunities or seeking refuge over there. So I think it all goes hand in hand. But I do agree that humanitarian assistance in the next short and immediate term does take precedent. But at the same time, I think some of the earlier iterations I made concerning the progresses that can be made on women's rights can certainly be met by Taliban, and they need to make that progress. And I think the time is due that they should
Let's
come
hope, Usama, that progress is made and progress is made very soon so that the aid also reaches in time in Afghanistan. A lot of issues are concern Afghanistan. A lot of issues are of course, being directly faced by Afghanistan as we speak, and they need to be addressed in a very rapid and efficient manner so that the country can heave a sigh of relief and kind of stand on its own 2 feet. Thank you very much, Usama Nizamani, researcher from IPRI, talking to us about the situation in Afghanistan and the naming of Reena Amiri as well as Stephanie Foster by the US government on key positions in Afghanistan. Let's come to our last 3 stories very quickly. The first concerns Omicron. We know about it. We've talked about it. This is the new variant of COVID-19 and it has arrived in Pakistan. Now, the number of cases as far as Pakistan is concerned is also increasing. It is on the increase. It is the first time that the number of cases has surpassed 400 in the last 24 hours. The last time the country reported more than 400 infections was on the 3rd of December. Now, if we see the breakdown of cases, Sindh has 285, Punjab 110, KP 49, Balochistan 4, Islamabad 31, and Azad Jammu and Kashmir and 3 cases. We need, as I've always been saying it, at the end of each show, we've done a special on Omicron as well and on COVID. We need to be extremely careful with this spread of Omicron. It is being said that January, February are going to be very testing months for the world, including Pakistan. So we need to be vigilant. We need to be following the SOPs. Then let's come to our next story, and that concerns Apple and India. Now, what has happened is that some 250 women who were working at Foxcom's iPhone factory in the southern Indian state of Tamil Nadu have been treated for food poisoning this month. As a result, also 159 were hospitalized, and there have been demonstrations against the living conditions at the company hostels that have kept the factory in Chennai closed since the 18th of December. This has now prompted the Apple company to place it on probation. This of course place in of Foxconn under probation after both companies found that some worker dormitories and dining halls did not meet the required standards of health and hygiene. Now, Apple has not explained what that probation meant, but of course that means a lot of preconditions that will be put on these factories, and these factories might also be closed down for a longer period of time. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to religious intolerance or religious tolerance, in fact, let's go to religious tolerance, where on one side we see religious intolerance going on in India, on the other hand in Pakistan we see a lot of religious tolerance happening, whether it be the Kartarpur corridor that we've seen as an example of the Sikh community being treated in a very proper manner. We've also seen different mannerisms through which the Hindus and the Hindu community has also been treated and also been given certain exemptions. Now, the Pakistan Hindu Council has invited a group of 250 Hindus to visit the country in an attempt to encourage this faith tourism. 54 Hindus from India, Canada, Singapore, Australia and Spain have already visited the country last month, and now there's going to be a new batch of Hindus that will be coming and visiting their temple. We want to create a Pakistan that is religiously tolerant, and we are endeavoring in that manner, unlike our not so friendly neighbor. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with news stories and segments that concern you, us and Pakistan. Tomorrow is also the last day of the year. Take care of yourselves, follow the SOPs, get yourselves vaccinated. Allah Hafiz.